blind date disaster? The poor mechanic sat at the wrong table and met the CEO's paralyzed daughter. You're at the wrong table, but could you maybe stay for a while? Charlotte Whitmore's voice was soft, hesitant, but not afraid. Her eyes, a clear sea blue beneath soft golden curls, met Jake's with curiosity and something else, loneliness. She sat in a sleek, modern wheelchair, dressed in a pastel blue gown that looked both elegant and quietly defiant. The soft lighting of the fine dining restaurant cast a halo around her, but her smile held a quiet ache. Jake Turner froze mid-squat as he lowered himself into the chair, his work-worn hands hovering awkwardly over the linen napkin. He looked around in confusion. This is table 7, right?" he asked, holding up a crumpled paper with the number scrawled in pen. "It is," Charlotte replied, her lips curling slightly. "But you're probably not who I was supposed to meet tonight." Jake scratched the back of his neck, cheeks flushing. He was dressed in his best button-up shirt, still wrinkled from the back of his closet, and his boots, though freshly wiped, bore the unmistakable scuffs of a man who worked with his hands. "Then I guess I really am in the wrong place," he said, half standing again. Charlotte paused. "But if you don't mind sitting with me anyway, I wouldn't mind a little company." He blinked. "Really? I mean, it's already awkward," she added with a dry smile. "Might as well embrace it." Jake sat down. And just like that, two strangers, both at the wrong table, began a conversation that would change everything. What neither of them knew was that fate, or a very convenient mix-up, had brought them together. Charlotte had arrived at the upscale restaurant that night for a blind date, set up through a discreet, no-profile photo dating app. After years of hiding behind headlines, expectations, and her wheelchair, she'd hoped this anonymous approach might finally let her meet someone who saw her, not her status or her disability. Her match, a man named Daniel G., was supposed to meet her at table 7. Jake, on the other hand, had never used a dating app in his life. His best friend, Marcus, had signed him up as a joke, filled in a fake profile, and even secured a dinner reservation using a promotional voucher he won from a radio contest. The plan was simple. Jake shows up, has a free steak, maybe meets someone interesting. What Marcus forgot to mention was that he'd accidentally, or intentionally, put Jake down for table 7. So when Jake arrived, scanned the room, and saw a beautiful woman sitting alone at the only open table labeled 7, he assumed the universe was being kinder than usual. And Charlotte, expecting a stranger anyway, thought perhaps her date had simply arrived unannounced. Neither of them suspected the truth. They talked, not about wealth, not about jobs, not about chairs or expectations. Jake told her about grilled cheese sandwiches and old rock music. Charlotte shared her love for thunderstorms and vintage film cameras. They joked about the tiny forks on the table and how neither of them knew what to do with them. Jake didn't ask about the wheelchair. Charlotte didn't mention her last name. For a while it felt like the world had melted away. Until it didn't. The real Daniel appeared 25 minutes later. Tall, overdressed, and oozing entitlement, he stormed over to the table and froze when he saw Charlotte. His face twisted. "Wait, you're in a wheelchair? This is a joke, right?" The restaurant fell into a sudden hush. Chairs scraped as patrons turned to stare. Even the clink of silverware paused mid-air. Charlotte's face drained of color. Her hands stiffened around her water glass. Jake slowly stood. He turned toward the man, voice calm but solid. "I'm the one sitting with her. Who are you?" Daniel sneered. "I'm her date." Jake took a step forward, placing himself directly between Charlotte and the man. "Not anymore." The silence deepened. Daniel scoffed, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out, leaving tension in his wake. Jake turned back to Charlotte, his expression softening. "You okay?" She nodded, barely. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. Jake shrugged. "Yeah, I did. He pulled out her chair gently and asked, "Do you want to get out of here?" Charlotte hesitated only a second, then nodded. Yes, very much. And as they left the restaurant, both still unaware they weren't meant to meet that night, something unspoken settled between them. The date might have been a mistake, but the connection? That felt real. Charlotte maneuvered her wheelchair away from the table, her fingers trembling slightly on the wheels. Jake followed a step behind, glancing back once at the empty chair where Daniel had stood moments earlier. Outside, the night air was cooler, calmer. The buzz of the restaurant faded behind them as they made their way down a narrow tree-lined path that opened up into a small city park lit by soft golden lamps. "I'm sorry," Jake said, his voice low. "I didn't mean to crash your night. I thought I was supposed to be at that table." Charlotte stopped by a bench and turned toward him. "You weren't supposed to be. But maybe. I'm glad you were." Jake smiled, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "If you still want someone to eat with, I know a food truck not far from here. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Nothing fancy, but the guy remembers your name after one order." Charlotte tilted her head. "Grilled cheese sounds perfect." They walked. She wheeled. He paced beside her. When they reached the truck, Jake ordered, adding, "Extra crispy edges. Trust me." They took their food to the park bench, steam rising from the paper cups. Charlotte sipped her soup. "So, what's your story, Mr. Mechanic?" Jake laughed. "You already figured me out?" "You smell like engine grease and kindness," she teased. "I'm a fast learner." He looked down at his sandwich, then back up at her. "Well, my dad passed when I was 10. Mom worked nights at the hospital. I started fixing bikes in middle school, then cars by high school. Never had much, but my little sister? She just graduated college. Full ride. That's what mattered." Charlotte's expression softened. "You raised her?" He nodded. "Best thing I ever did." She leaned back in her chair. "That's beautiful." Jake looked at her gently. "What about you?" Charlotte hesitated. Her fingers curled slightly around the cup in her lap. 3 years ago. Car accident. It was raining. I was driving. Lost control. Jake waited. Silent. "My lower spine was crushed. Doctors said I was lucky to live. Some days I'm not sure if that's true." Jake's eyes met hers, unwavering. "I think it is." She looked away for a moment, blinking. "Tonight was my first date since. I guess I thought if I hid everything, maybe someone could see me before they saw the chair." "I saw you," Jake said softly. She turned back toward him, surprised. "You were wearing a blue dress, hair like sunshine, telling a stranger about olives. That's what I saw." For a moment, she couldn't speak. As she reached for her drink, her grip slipped slightly. Juice spilled across her hand and lap. "Oh," she gasped, instinctively pulling back. Without hesitation, Jake reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a clean handkerchief, slightly faded but neatly folded, and gently dabbed at her fingers. "It's okay. I've got it," he murmured, his hands careful, respectful. Charlotte's breath caught. He wasn't flustered, he wasn't overreacting, he just helped. Jake glanced up at her, his voice steady. "I wiped your hand because it's beautiful, not because I feel sorry for you." She froze. Something cracked, quietly, in her chest. Then, slowly, her lips curled into a smile. Not polite, not guarded, real. A quiet, radiant smile that reached her eyes. Jake smiled back, folding the handkerchief and tucking it away. They finished their food in easy silence, letting the city hum around them. As they parted later that evening, Jake offered, "I don't know what tomorrow is, but tonight, I'm really glad I sat at the wrong table." Charlotte looked up at him, her eyes shimmering under the streetlight. "So am I." It began with coincidence, or what they still like to call coincidence, even after the third time. Jake was already at the corner diner when Charlotte wheeled in one misty morning, her hair tied up in a loose bun, cheeks pink from the early chill. He looked up from his coffee, surprised, and smiled like he had been waiting all along. "Let me guess," he said. "Black coffee, 2 sugars, and no pancakes because you're secretly judging me for mine." Charlotte laughed. "I never said that." "You didn't have to. It's in the eyes." She rolled her eyes and joined him anyway. From that morning on, they accidentally met at the same places. The diner with greasy hash browns, the park bench where the hot dog cart guy remembered Jake's name, the tiny movie theater that still used reels and had popcorn butter that soaked through the bag. Sometimes Charlotte would pretend it was a coincidence. Other times she admitted she checked his garage window before deciding to go for a walk. Whatever it was, it felt easy. Jake never asked why she was in a wheelchair. He never flinched when she struggled with a ramp or took a little longer to get out of the car. What he did ask was, "What's your favorite smell? Do you believe in soulmates? What's something no one knows about you?" And he always listened, really listened, like every word she said was a treasure map. One drizzly afternoon, she surprised him at the garage with a bag of lunch and a stolen hour of her day. He was changing a tire in the rain, sleeves rolled up, hair soaked, his voice singing along to some old country tune under his breath. She watched from the car for a minute before getting out. He looked up and grinned. "You brought food. I may love you." She smirked. "It's just grilled cheese." "It's the gesture that counts." They sat under the garage awning, rain pattering on the tin roof, biting into their sandwiches and wiping their hands on napkins that didn't do much. Jake pulled off his gloves and leaned back. "You know, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Yeah. I used to sketch everything. Cars, trees, birds, even cereal boxes. Once I tried to draw my sister while she was crying, and she didn't talk to me for 3 days. She laughed. "Why'd you stop?" Jake's smile faded a little. "We couldn't afford the supplies. My mom was working nights, and I had to help out more. Eventually, I traded pencils for socket wrenches, kept the lights on, but the dreams kind of dimmed." Charlotte was quiet for a moment, then reached into her tote bag. She pulled out a small sketchbook and flipped to a page. It was him. Jake, crouched next to a car, rain pouring over him, muscles tense, expression focused. The light caught on his soaked hair, the strength in his arms, and something soft in the way he worked. "You drew this?" he asked, stunned. She nodded. "I had to. You looked like yourself." Jake stared at the drawing, speechless. "No one's ever drawn me before," he finally said. She shrugged, but her cheeks flushed. "I just wanted you to see how I see you." That night, Charlotte returned home later than usual. Her hands were cold, her body tired, but her heart was wide awake. When she opened her purse to put away her sketchbook, she found a small folded square of paper tucked between the pages. It was a note, written in Jake's handwriting, firm, a little uneven, but unmistakably his. She unfolded it slowly, her breath catching as she read. "I'd choose your smile over 1,000 steps." Charlotte sat in stunned silence. Then, without meaning to, she began to cry. Not from sadness, but from the kind of deep, overwhelming gratitude that fills your lungs like wind and breaks you open in the most beautiful way. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever seen past the chair, the whispers, the walls. But Jake had. And somehow, in the smallest, simplest note, he had given her something no one else had. The photo was grainy, but the headline was sharp enough to cut through steel. "Heiress caught slumming. Billionaire's daughter seen canoodling with grease monkey mechanic." Charlotte stared at the tabloid on her tablet. The image showed her laughing beside Jake outside his garage, his hand gently resting on the back of her wheelchair. The caption beneath it read, "Love or lust for fortune." Her stomach twisted. She hadn't seen the flash, hadn't noticed the shadow behind the dumpster. But now, it was everywhere. News feeds, gossip blogs, whispers behind designer coffee cups. When she stepped into her father's office, the air felt cold, despite the polished oak and warm lighting. William Whitmore didn't look up from the paper. "Close the door," he said curtly. Charlotte obeyed. He lifted the tabloid and held it up like a weapon. "Explain this." She sat straighter in her chair. "There's nothing to explain. I was spending time with someone I care about." "Someone," he repeated bitterly. "A mechanic with no pedigree, no future, who sees you as a payday." Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "Jake isn't like that." Her father stood, voice rising. "You think he's with you for your charm? You're my only child, the public face of this empire, and you've become a joke." "He didn't ask for any of this." "He doesn't have to," Whitmore snapped. "Men like him don't ask, they take." Charlotte clenched the arms of her chair. "You don't know him." "I know enough," her father said darkly. "I had him investigated." She froze. "You what?" "I know his financials, his work history, his criminal record." "He doesn't have a record." "Not the point," he growled. "He's nothing. You can't build a future with nothing." Charlotte's voice trembled. "I wasn't aware my future had to be approved, like a business merger." Her father's gaze hardened. "You want love? Fine. Find someone who understands your world, who doesn't fix flat tires for a living." She left without another word. Later that evening, she texted Jake to meet at the diner they'd grown to love. The neon lights flickered over vinyl booths and chipped mugs. She arrived early, trying to steady her breathing. Jake entered, wiping his hands on his jeans, smile fading when he saw her expression. "Everything okay?" She forced a smile. "Yeah. Just a long day." They ordered the usual, eggs over easy for him, tea with lemon for her. Jake noticed her silence. "You're quieter than usual." Charlotte stirred her tea, eyes downcast. "My father found out." Jake leaned back. "And?" "He's not happy." Jake sighed. "Figured as much." She looked up, forcing casualness. "Maybe we should cool things down. Just lay low for a bit." Jake's brows furrowed. "Cool things down? Why? Did I do something wrong?" "No," she said too quickly. "It's just complicated." Jake studied her, reading every flicker of hesitation. Then, softly, "I don't need your father's approval, or his money. I don't care about being accepted into any boardroom. I just need to know you're still you." She didn't answer. He leaned forward. "Charlotte, I don't care if the world thinks I'm nobody. I just need to know the person I'm sitting across from is still the girl who smiled at grilled cheese and sketched me like I mattered." She blinked fast, swallowing hard. But her silence spoke louder than tears. Jake leaned back, the hurt in his eyes barely hidden. "Right." He stood slowly, placing enough cash to cover both meals on the table. Charlotte opened her mouth, but stopped. He looked at her one last time. "I don't need a title, Charlotte. I just need you to still be you." And then he turned. She didn't stop him. Instead, she wheeled herself out the back entrance, into the night, where no one could see her heart breaking. Jake knew they were watching him. It started subtly. Unfamiliar cars parked across from the garage, strangers pretending to ask for oil changes, a man in a suit lingering near the shop entrance, pretending to check his phone. Then came the visit. A black sedan pulled up after closing. The man who stepped out wasn't large, but carried the weight of authority like a badge. Crisp suit, cold eyes. "I represent Mr. Whitmore," he said smoothly, without offering a hand. Jake folded his arms. "Of course you do. You've become an inconvenience." Jake said nothing. The man took a step closer. "Let me be blunt. Walk away, quietly. No more dinners, no more text messages. No more contact with Miss Whitmore. Jake's jaw clenched. Or what? The man smiled, almost kindly. You know how fragile your license is. A small report here, a complaint there. Things happen. Inspections fail. Loans disappear. He slipped a card onto Jake's workbench. Be smart. Then he left. Jake stood there long after the taillights vanished. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from rage, helplessness, and love. He stared at his phone. One missed call from Charlotte. He didn't call back. He couldn't. For her sake. Charlotte stared at her phone like it had betrayed her. 16 missed calls. 17. 23. All unanswered. The last time they'd spoken was at the diner. Since then, silence. She texted, "Are you okay?" Nothing. "Please talk to me." Nothing. "Jake, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push you away." Nothing. She started calling every night, let it ring to voicemail, left messages. Her voice broke in the third one. She stopped trying after the seventh. But every morning, her first thought was still the same. Call him. Just try again. One night, after a week of silence, she found a small envelope in her apartment mailbox. No name, just her address written in careful print. She tore it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a single folded piece of paper, and his handwriting, so familiar it hurt. "I can't walk beside you, Charlotte, but I'll always be just behind you, like a shadow that keeps you standing. This is not goodbye. It's just me, keeping you safe. Jake." Her breath caught. She read it again. And again. Then the paper slipped from her hand. "No?" Her scream echoed off the walls. She wheeled backward, knocking over the small table in her hallway. Her sketch pad scattered, pencils clattered across the floor. She slammed her fists into the arms of her chair, eyes blazing with tears. "Why?" she cried. "Why are you doing this?" She pushed herself toward the door, flung it open, rolled into the empty hallway, and shouted down the silence. "I don't want to be protected. I want you." No answer. Only the faint hum of a vending machine, and the sharp sobs breaking from her chest. She wheeled back into her apartment and slammed the door shut. Then, she did the only thing she hadn't done since the accident. She let herself fall apart. The rain came without warning. Thick, heavy drops soaked Charlotte's dress as she wheeled herself down the street, her hair clinging to her cheeks, her breath short, fast. She didn't care. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She just went. The bridge wasn't far, but every inch of the way felt heavier than it should. Her arms ached, her fingers numb, but she kept pushing. Because the memory was stronger than the storm. It was her favorite place as a child, the old pedestrian bridge over the river. Her mother used to bring her there on warm evenings. They'd count the boats and throw breadcrumbs to the ducks. It was where her mother had once said, "You'll walk across this bridge on your own one day." That dream died the night of the accident. And now, all she wanted was to reach it, alone. One last time. Charlotte turned onto the ramp, wheels squeaking against the soaked pavement. The rain poured harder, blurring the lights of the city behind her. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance. She made it halfway across when the front wheel jolted. "Come on," she whispered. The wheel was stuck in a crack between boards. She rocked the chair gently, trying to dislodge it, but it didn't budge. Another tug. Nothing. And then, headlights. From the far side of the bridge, a delivery truck appeared, moving faster than it should in the downpour. Charlotte waved frantically, screaming, "Stop!" But the driver couldn't see her in the rain. The bridge was narrow, visibility low. She yanked at the wheels again, panic rising in her throat. The truck was too close now. Too fast. Too late. Suddenly, a shout cut through the storm. "I'm not ready to lose you again." A figure burst onto the bridge, sprinting through the rain. "Jake." His boots slammed against the wet wood, slipping once, catching himself, eyes locked on hers. Charlotte's lips trembled. Jake. In one motion, he reached her, grabbed the handles of her chair, and yanked with all his strength. The wheel tore loose. He spun the chair out of the truck's path, just as it screamed past, horn blaring. They tumbled to the side, crashing onto the walkway. Jake's arms wrapped around her as they fell, shielding her body with his. The truck vanished into the rain. For a moment, there was only the sound of thunder, her heartbeat, and his breath against her ear. Charlotte clung to him, sobbing uncontrollably. Her fists gripped his soaked jacket. "I thought," she choked. "I thought you were gone for good." Jake cupped her face, rain running down his fingers like tears. "I tried to be. I thought staying away would protect you." Her eyes searched his, desperate, raw. "I don't need protection," she whispered. "I need you." Jake closed his eyes. "I couldn't stop thinking about you. Every second, every breath." Charlotte leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "Then don't leave again." "I won't." They stayed like that for a long moment, rain falling around them like a curtain, shielding them from the world. Two broken hearts, stitched together by a single, impossible moment. Jake tightened his arms around her. "I love you, Charlotte." She looked up at him. "I love you too." They kissed, slowly, deeply, rain mingling with tears, pain fading into warmth. And somewhere, deep in her chest, the weight began to lift. The Whitmore estate was quiet when Charlotte returned. The rain from the night before had passed, leaving the garden glistening under pale morning sunlight. She rolled through the marble entryway, her wheels echoing softly against the tiles, past portraits of her ancestors, men in suits, women in pearls, none of them smiling. At the top of the stairs, her father's study door was open. He sat at his massive desk, scanning papers, as if the headlines about his daughter hadn't caused a corporate media storm just days ago. Charlotte entered, her hands calm but firm on the wheels. William Whitmore didn't look up. "Did you enjoy your walk in the rain?" he asked dryly. "I came to talk," Charlotte said evenly. He finally glanced at her, eyes cold, jaw set. "If it's about that mechanic again, then don't waste your breath." She met his gaze without flinching. "Jake Turner is the man I love." His mouth twitched with disdain. "A man with no pedigree, no class, no vision. You think that's love? You've been manipulated, Charlotte." "No," she said, voice sharpening. "I've been seen, heard, respected. Things I haven't felt in this house for years." William stood, walking around the desk, towering over her as if to intimidate, but she didn't shrink back. "I've built everything you have," he said. "The life you live, the name you carry, it was earned through sacrifice. I won't let you throw it away for someone who doesn't belong in our world." "I don't want your world," Charlotte said, trembling with the force of truth. "Not if it means choosing between you and my happiness." "You'd leave the company?" he asked, stunned. Charlotte nodded slowly. "Yes, if you can't accept Jake, I will step away from Whitmore Properties. I won't live under your control anymore." The air went still. A door creaked open behind them. Jake stood in the doorway, his hands clean, shirt pressed, but his eyes betrayed the nerves beneath. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, stepping inside, voice low but steady. William stared at him with contempt. "You've got nerve." Jake nodded. "Yes, sir, I do." He walked forward, stood beside Charlotte, then gave a respectful bow of his head. "I'm not here to ask for your blessing," he began. "I know you think I'm not enough for her, and maybe, in your world, I never will be. I don't have the right last name. I fix cars. I take night shifts. My hands are always dirty." He paused, glancing down at Charlotte with softness in his eyes. "But I love your daughter with everything I have. I don't want her money. I don't need her name. I just want to stand beside her and give her the kind of life where she never feels small again. Charlotte blinked back tears. Jake turned back to her father. You can dig through my records, threaten my job, send people to tail me, but you can't scare me into leaving her. William's face darkened. You think that's courage? Jake met his gaze. No, that's love. There was a silence, heavy with pride, fury, and something unspoken. Charlotte reached for Jake's hand. You once told me to find someone who would fight for me. He just did. William looked between them, eyes sharp but unreadable. He didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't forgive. But he turned, slowly, and walked back behind his desk. That, somehow, said enough. Jake squeezed her hand, breath shaky but relieved. As they exited the study together, Charlotte whispered, You were perfect. Jake smiled slightly. I was terrified. She leaned into him. I've never been prouder of anything in my life. And for the first time since her mother's passing, Charlotte felt truly free, because she wasn't just choosing love. She was choosing herself. 6 months later, the backyard behind Jake's garage looked nothing like it had ever looked before. Where there were usually scattered tires, rusted tools, and old car parts, now stood folding chairs, strings of fairy lights, wild flowers in mason jars, and a makeshift altar crafted from salvaged wood and old metal Jake had polished himself. It was simple. It was imperfect. But it was theirs. The guests were a mix of worlds that never would have met before. Mechanics in rolled-up sleeves, friends from the neighborhood, a few of Charlotte's college classmates, and surprisingly, a handful of men and women in tailored suits from the Whitmore corporate office. But the only two people anyone was truly watching were standing at either end of the grassy aisle. Jake stood beneath the altar, fidgeting nervously, wearing a dark vest over a white shirt, his tie slightly crooked the way Charlotte always teased him about. And then, the music began. Charlotte appeared from behind the garage, holding tightly onto a silver frame walker. Her dress was elegant but simple, white satin that shimmered like moonlight. Her golden hair was swept into a soft braid with loose curls framing her glowing face. The guests stood, gasping softly. Each step she took was slow, measured, and absolutely deliberate. One foot, then the other. She wasn't carried. She didn't roll. She walked. Jake's eyes filled instantly with tears. When she finally reached him, he took her hand like it was something precious, something never to be taken for granted. You walk to me, he whispered. Charlotte smiled, breathless and beaming. I told you I would. They stood before the officiant, under the sun, and surrounded by people who had doubted, disapproved, or simply hadn't understood. But none of it mattered anymore. Their vows were short, honest. Charlotte promised laughter and partnership, even on the days when the weight of healing felt too heavy. Jake promised safety, patience, and a hand that would never let go. I didn't fix your car, he said during his vows, voice cracking. But I promise to keep holding the pieces of your heart, even when they feel broken. When the kiss came, it wasn't met with polite claps. It was met with wild cheers, loud whistles, and tears, so many tears. As the music resumed and the guests began to move toward the buffet tables, one man remained still. William Whitmore. Charlotte's father stood just beyond the altar, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. Jake noticed him, hesitated, then approached slowly, ready for whatever came next. William looked at his daughter for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Jake. He didn't say much, just stepped forward, placed a firm hand on Jake's shoulder, and said quietly, Take care of her, that's all. Jake nodded. I will, always.